welcome to the Dresden Nexus podcast, recorded live from the 2025 Dresden Nexus Conference. I'm your host, Atika Fairuz Saleh, and today we're joined by Professor Joseph Alcamo, Professor of Environmental Systems Science and the Director of the Sussex Sustainability Research Programme, SSRP, at the University of Sussex, United Kingdom. He is also Chair of the UNU-FLORES International Advisory Committee. Now, this year marks a special occasion as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the United Nations University. Throughout this series, we'll explore the future of resources and how navigating the interconnected challenges of water, energy, food, land, and other resources, the resource nexus, will shape our path toward a sustainable world. In this episode, we'll hear from Professor Alcamo, who will share his invaluable insights. Thank you for joining us today, Joe.
Very nice to be here.
Let's dive into the conversation.
Okay.
Given your pioneering work in environmental modeling and your experience as chief scientist at United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, how can integrated environmental models bridge the gap between scientific research and policy making to effectively address global environmental challenges?
Well, that's a really good question. It's funny because integrated environmental models as a concept doesn't particularly sound like a great communication tool, does it? Because it does involve equations, algorithms, a lot of computer time, a lot of technical know-how. But ironically enough, it's the type of computer model that's turned out over the past decades to make a valuable contribution to communication between the policymakers and scientists. I can give you two specific examples. It's better than to understand how it works. Well, the first example goes back to the 1980s already. And I was involved in developing a model called RAINS, which described for acid rain in Europe, which was a big deal at the time, what the cause of the acid rain was. And we used the model to articulate what the contribution of the emissions from each country, the air pollution emissions, how it contributed to acid rain in another European country, taking into account all kinds of things. The emissions from power plants, the distribution of the pollution in the atmosphere, and its impact on the environment. So an integrated model was able to capture all of those processes, and it managed to do it in such a transparent enough way that it was used in Europe over several years as a basis for negotiation between countries in Europe, and ultimately led to a transboundary air pollution treaty in Europe, the first of its kind, I believe it was, at which countries literally agreed to and actually did reduce their sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions. So it was kind of a win-win on all sides. It served as a common playing field where it wasn't just one scientific group, but other scientific groups could come around this particular model and the policymakers, and it worked. A more recent example is when I was chief scientist at UNEP. I convened integrated environmental modelers of climate change together, and we put together a report in 2010, which has been published and updated every year since 2010 by UNEP, and it's called the Emission Gap Report. And that is a report representing the views or the models of about 15 different scientific groups, and it explains to policymakers what the implications are of their current climate policies, whether they'll be sufficient or not to comply with the temperature limits under the Paris Agreement. And each year, it is published right before the Conference of Parties, these huge events where the negotiations continue, and dozens of countries refer to this report as a basis for saying, well, we're doing enough or we're not doing enough. So again, integrated environmental modeling, funny enough, turning out to be a common playing field for different countries and different scientific groups.
Thank you for sharing your very rich experiences at this international global level. And indeed, considering your extensive career in environmental science, what emerging trends or challenges do you foresee in the coming decades, and how should the scientific community prepare for these to address them?
Also a good question. There's several things I could say, and there's unfortunately so many things going wrong. I mean, a lot of things going right, but a lot of things going in the wrong direction. I'll just pick out this one. I'm concerned about something which I call the Global Water Quality Challenge. So it turns out, scientists, but I think also policymakers agree that water quality is at the nexus of so many different things. It's at the nexus of health. It's at the nexus of biodiversity. It's at the nexus of food security. It turns out that water quality as an environmental issue and as a sustainability issue connects a lot of different things. For example, since millions of people still come in contact with water on a daily basis for bathing, for washing their cooking implements, and for other reasons, it turns out that polluted water is a major source, a major health risk to millions of people around the world. It's not discussed enough. The other thing, water supply. So water quality, bad water quality, is at the nexus of health, but also water supply. It's obvious that water quality has to be high enough, otherwise it cannot serve as drinking water. So it's a vital factor in the amount of water supply we have. Biodiversity. Some of the largest numbers of species concentrated in the world depend on freshwater ecosystems. And all around the world, we are polluting, well, in some countries, especially developing countries, as the countries get richer, as their economies develop, generally water pollution is not a high priority for them, and inadvertently the higher levels of water pollution are restricting the habitat of freshwater species. And so now we have many threatened freshwater species because of water quality in freshwater ecosystems. And so there's all of these different, it's even connected to food security, because freshwater fisheries are a major source of animal protein in many different countries in the global south. And so the Global Water Quality Challenge is certainly an epitome of a nexus challenge. And I'm happy to report that the United Nations and several NGOs have already formed the Global Water Quality Alliance, which is a good thing, the World Water Quality Alliance is what it's called. And I would like to encourage my fellow researchers and scientists out there to get involved in that. Now it's in the policy arena, and it needs to make a connection now with the science. They need to hear about the latest science. And I think they're not involved enough. Scientists are not involved enough. So that's certainly what organizations, excellent research organizations like FLORES at United Nations University, which provides research and input to the United Nations, could provide also scientific research for the World Water Quality Alliance.
Thank you. That's a brilliant segue to my next question. In your role as chair of the advisory committee of United Nations University FLORES here in Dresden, how do you see the resource nexus approach evolving in the coming years, and what do you believe are the key areas where this integrated framework can drive meaningful progress in global sustainability?
Okay, good question. It's my view that the nexus approach is most important because it is an integrated approach. That's what sets it apart from other scientific methods. Not all scientific methods, there's other integrated scientific methods, but it certainly embraces the idea that in order to advance sustainability, we have to address several issues at the same time. It's really difficult since none of us are trained that way, but now you have FLORES out there that's training people to think in a multi-dimensional way to solve problems. So the funny thing is, when you talk about where the Nexus approach should go, I think that this kind of integrated approach has a funny parallel with the integrated approach taken by United Nations policymakers. They also have to be fast on their feet, and they have to be experts in poverty one day and water pollution the next day and climate the next day. They also have to take an integrated approach. So my thinking is, especially as the chair of the advisory board, is that we have a golden opportunity here to bring the Nexus approach in a big way, to scale it up, bring it to the United Nations. I'm thinking for virtually all of the agencies in the United Nations, and I've been involved in one way or another with several of them, and for many of the divisions within these agencies, they would welcome having an approach like the Nexus approach to help them with their problem solving. So my vision is that over the next 10 years, that the Nexus approach becomes one of the fundamental toolkits used within the United Nations to solve problems all around the world. A small aspiration, but a feasible one. Come on.
I would really like to see that.
What's the point of having small aspirations? It's boring.
Excellent. Now, if you have to, in one word, what do we need most to secure a bright resource future?
Oh, this is tough. I don't know who thought of these questions, whether it was you or someone else, but you're tough. Okay, so when I need to simplify the complexity of the world in to try and explain to myself why things are going on, I believe that humans are driven by fear and they're driven by hope at the same time. And how the world is doing depends on what is predominating at that particular time. Now we are clearly in an era where fear is right on top. I'm afraid of you, and I'm afraid of your country, and I'm afraid of any organization where I have to share anything. It's fear. So I would say the one word that we need in order to realize the vision of the Nexus approach, of the approach where we solve problems collectively and at the same time, would be hope.
Thank you, and congratulations. You're done with the grilling session. I hope you enjoyed.
You are tough. Well, good thing I had lunch already. Otherwise, I'd really be in a bad mood.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing your expertise
Great.
and vision on such a critical topic. It's conversations like these that help us to reimagine and hope for a better future, for resources, for sustainability, for the planet. We hope you enjoyed this episode and that it has sparked many new ideas, I hope, on how we can all contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future. Stay tuned for more episodes of the Dresden Nexus podcast, where thought leaders from around the world come together to explore solutions to the resource nexus. Until next time, I'm Atika Fairuz Saleh, and thank you for listening.